Hello, my name is Kelly. Ever since I was a child, I dreamed of becoming a journalist or working in magazine publishing. My passion for writing and staying on top of trends naturally led me to pursue a degree in journalism and media. During college, I immersed myself in the world of storytelling, and upon graduation, I started working for several companies. While none were particularly well known, I took pride in knowing I was living out my dream. Around the time I turned 30, I met Matthew, my future husband. Matthew came from a wealthy family that ran a successful business. And while this seemed like a minor detail at first, it turned out to be a significant factor in my life. His mother, Grace, never approved of me. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't consider me a suitable match for her son, often criticizing my career in journalism and belittling my academic background. Grace's negative attitude was hurtful at first. It's difficult to feel constantly undermined, especially by someone who should welcome you into the family. For reasons only she could understand, Grace thought it was acceptable to treat me poorly. Thankfully, Matthew always stood by me, defending me against her harsh words. His father, Larry, was also on my side, stating up for me whenever Grace crossed the line. Over time, I grew more resilient to her jabs. Matthew even suggested we distance ourselves from her, but I disagreed. Matthew worked closely with his father in the family business, and distancing ourselves from Grace could have made things uncomfortable for Larry, who was nothing but kind. I didn't want to be the cause of tension in their family, nor did I want Matthew to sever ties with his mother. I learned to be patient, recognizing that maintaining family relationships often involves navigating complex emotions and difficult circumstances. We limited our interactions with Grace to a few times a month, but that dynamic shifted when Larry had to travel overseas for business. Grace, not wanting to be alone, moved in with us until his return. I was hesitant about the arrangement but believed that family should come first. Living with Grace, however, was far more challenging than I anticipated. She found fault in almost everything I did, and her criticisms seemed relentless. Still, I managed to maintain my composure, reminding myself that as long as her words caused no actual harm, I could endure her presence. But my patience was truly tested during a particularly stressful week at work. I was leading a major redesign for a section of our magazine, an important project that could lead to a promotion. The pressure was immense, and Grace, oblivious to the weight of my responsibilities, seemed indifferent to the stress I was under. The night before my big presentation, I was discussing my anxieties with Matthew when Grace overheard us. She waltzed into the living room and decided to offer her unsolicited opinion. "Well, Kelly," she began, "I overheard your conversation, and honestly, you probably don't have the skills for this. You'll likely do poorly tomorrow." Her words were cold, and she followed up with, "Maybe it's time to quit and focus on being a housewife." Her comment stung deeply, not just because of the lack of support, but because it revealed her complete disregard for my professional aspirations. I tried to brush it off, but then she added, "I can't believe he married a journalist." Her tone was dripping with scorn, as if my career and everything I worked for were worthless in her eyes. Frustrated, I finally stood up for myself. "Grace, you're overstepping. I don't have time for this right now. I have more important things to focus on than your opinion of me." She looked stunned by my boldness. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shot back, turning to Matthew. "Say something. Your wife is disrespecting your mother." But Matthew stayed calm, siding with me. "Mom, she's just defending herself. There's nothing wrong with that." Grace, clearly offended, accused me of turning Matthew against his family. "Look how easily you've turned him against us," she spat. "You'll regret this, Kelly." Her intrusion into our private conversation and her blatant disrespect left me simmering with anger, but I chose not to let it consume me. Matthew tried to apologize on her behalf, but I stopped him. It wasn't his burden to bear. After that heated exchange, we decided to call it a night. My mind was too occupied with my presentation to dwell on Grace's threats, but the tension lingered. The next morning, I focused on what truly mattered: my career and the opportunity ahead. I arrived at work early, eager and prepared for my presentation. But when I opened my laptop, I was met with a heart-stopping discovery. All the files on my desktop were gone. It was as if my laptop had been completely reset. Panic surged through me as I frantically checked my email, hoping the backups I'd sent would save me. But to my horror, even my inbox and trash had been wiped clean. Overwhelmed and fighting back tears, I approached my boss to explain the situation. His reaction was anything but understanding. He reprimanded me harshly, his voice sharp with frustration, and then coldly told me to forget the presentation altogether. The weight of his words hit me hard. As if that wasn't enough, I soon found out that my boss had a backup presenter lined up just in case I failed. In that moment, it became painfully clear that my chances for advancement at the company were slim. Devastated by the turn of events, I left the office in tears, my heart heavy with disappointment. When I got home, Matthew was still there. The moment he saw me, his expression changed, and without hesitation, he decided to take the day off to be with me. He pulled me into his arms as I cried, the stress and heartbreak of the morning overwhelming me. Once I had calmed down a little, he gently asked, "What happened, honey? Didn't the presentation go well?" "There was no presentation," I replied, my voice shaky. "At least not by me." Matthew looked at me confused. "What do you mean? You've been working so hard on this for days. You barely slept." I took a deep breath, still struggling with the shock of it all. When I got to work and opened my laptop, everything was gone. All the files were deleted. His brows furrowed in disbelief. "How is that even possible?" "It's embarrassing," I admitted, the memory still fresh and stinging. I had to explain the whole thing to my boss. I'd backed everything up by emailing it to myself, but even my inbox and trash had been completely emptied. Matthew's face softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry this happened. What did your boss say?" I sighed, the words still heavy on my chest. He was furious. He called me unprofessional and lazy. And the worst part, he had someone else ready to give the presentation. The bitterness in my voice was hard to hide. "But you still have your job, right?" Matthew tried to find a silver lining. "Yes, but I'm stuck. There's no room for me to advance or move up. I'm done here," I said, defeated. "Don't worry, honey. You'll find a better job. I'll be here for you through it all. Just keep working there until you're ready to leave," he reassured me, his support unwavering. "Yeah, I'll give my notice soon. I can't believe I worked so hard for this, and just when I was so close, it all slipped away," I said, the realization sinking in. The whole incident had left me shaken. I'd always taken pride in my work, and to have a project unravel so disastrously felt traumatic. Though I stayed on for another week, my heart wasn't in it anymore. When I finally submitted my resignation, I was counting down the days until I could walk away. Throughout this ordeal, Grace's reaction was strangely gleeful. She caught me in tears one day and instead of offering comfort, made snide remarks, gloating over my misfortune. At first, her words fueled my anger. But then I realized that her satisfaction in my struggles was just a reflection of her own bitterness. As I reflected on Grace's behavior, an unsettling thought crossed my mind. What if her delight wasn't just about me leaving my job? What if she had actually been involved in the disaster? The suspicion gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Grace might have sabotaged my laptop. The idea that she could have played a role in the ruin of my career haunted me. Before bringing such a serious accusation to Matthew, I knew I needed concrete proof. Determined to uncover the truth, I devised a plan to monitor her discreetly. I purchased a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector and installed it in my home office. I synced the device with my phone, setting everything up to capture any suspicious activity. The next part of my plan was to bait Grace into revealing her possible involvement. I made it a point to appear visibly stressed and anxious whenever I was in the office, hoping it would draw her attention. Matthew was still at work, completely unaware of the unfolding drama. As expected, Grace took notice of my anxious pacing. "What's wrong? Are you stressed about another project?" she prodded, her tone dripping with false concern. Taking a deep breath, I decided to play into her curiosity. "Yeah, it's just been really tough lately," I confided, setting the trap. "I've been given another chance to present my work. It could lead to a raise," I shared, trying to mask my anxiety with a glimmer of hope. Grace's interest was immediately piqued, her tone dripping with both surprise and skepticism. "Oh, really?" "Yes," I continued, "but I'm nervous. This is my last chance to get it right, and I have to do well." I watched her reaction carefully, hoping to catch a hint of her true intentions. "Why aren't you telling Matthew? Are you embarrassed about your job?" she asked, her words sharp. "It's not that," I sighed. "I just don't want to disappoint him again. Please, let's keep this between us, okay?" I pleaded, trying to gauge her response. Grace shrugged, her reply chilling. "I'm not promising anything, but it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow." Frustrated, I couldn't hold back. "Why do you always want me to fail?" I confronted her. Grace scoffed. I just think you'd be better off as a housewife. It's less embarrassing than what you're doing now." Her words stung, and I felt my patience thin. "I don't have time for this, and I don't care what you think. Please just leave me alone so I can practice before Matthew gets home." With that, Grace finally left, but her unsettling smirk lingered in my mind long after she was gone. I stayed in the office a little while longer, processing everything before leaving to join Matthew when he got home. Throughout dinner, I couldn't shake the unease that her occasional smirks brought. Each one sent a ripple of anxiety through me, heightening my suspicion. Later that night, after Matthew and I had settled into our usual routine of watching a few episodes of our favorite show, I decided it was time to check the footage from the hidden camera in my office. As we watched, the screen showed nothing unusual until around midnight. That's when Grace stealthily entered the office. My heart raced as I hastily showed Matthew the live feed on my phone. At first, he was puzzled, but soon disbelief crossed his face as Grace tampered with my laptop, causing it to shut off and restart. Matthew's expression shifted from shock to anger as he realized what was happening. Meanwhile, the camera showed Grace rifling through my files. Unable to contain his frustration, Matthew stormed into the office, his footsteps heavy with fury. He burst through the door, startling Grace, who spun around, caught in the act. "What are you doing in here, Ma?" Matthew demanded, his voice strained as he tried to maintain his composure. "Oh, nothing really," Grace replied, feigning nonchalance. "Then why is Kelly's laptop open? Are you accusing me of going through her stuff?" Matthew pressed, his voice rising with suspicion. "I think you did more than just go through her laptop, Mom. Did you come here to tidy up at midnight? You know Kelly would never leave her laptop open like that," Matthew retorted, his frustration clear. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm still your mother," Grace snapped defensively. "Yeah, my mother who seems to enjoy hurting and sabotaging my wife," Matthew shot back, his voice unwavering. "We caught you on camera resetting Kelly's laptop. You were spying on me? That's disgusting. How could you film me without my consent?" Grace exclaimed, her indignation rising. "I didn't put cameras in your room," I interjected, stepping beside Matthew. "I installed one in my office. You went in there without permission." The confrontation had brought to light the extent of Grace's interference, and it was a defining moment for all of us, a test of both loyalty and trust. Despite her wrongdoing, Matthew stood firm in his decision. "Even if we did film you, it's nothing compared to what you've done to Kelly. I want you out of our house tomorrow," he declared resolutely. Grace's voice wavered with desperation. "But I'll be all alone." "I don't care, Mom. I don't want to talk to you right now," Matthew replied, his mind made up. The next morning, Grace attempted to stall her departure by making breakfast and washing dishes, hoping to buy more time. But Matthew wasn't swayed. As soon as she finished, he came downstairs with her bags already packed. "Your Uber's on its way," he informed her. Grace pleaded tearfully, a rare display of vulnerability from someone who typically brought others to tears. But Matthew, unmoved, retreated to our room, leaving me to face her alone. "You set me up," Grace lashed out, her voice trembling with accusation. I met her gaze calmly, though my words were firm. "If anyone should be yelling, it's me. You're lucky I haven't shared the footage with your friends and family. If they knew what you did, you'd lose them all." My words silenced her. After Grace's departure, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, though my job situation still weighed heavily on my mind. However, with Matthew's support, I knew I'd find my way forward. Once my notice period ended, I took some time off to rest and recalibrate. In the months that followed, I enrolled in specialized courses related to my field, honing in on a niche that could give me the edge I needed. My decision not to expose Grace was driven by a desire to rise above her pettiness and prove my capabilities on my own terms. With Matthew's family connections, I secured several promising recommendations, and with his unwavering support, I found the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. I was offered the role of chief editor at a globally recognized magazine. The work was demanding but incredibly fulfilling. As I threw myself into my new role, the need to prove myself to Grace faded into the background. In fact, during those transformative months, we had no contact with her at all. My journey to becoming chief editor wasn't just a professional victory, it was a personal liberation. I no longer needed to validate my worth to someone who had doubted me. Matthew, meanwhile, continued to maintain a professional relationship with his father, Larry, though we heard little about Grace. Larry hinted that she still harbored some resentment, but he kept the details to himself. Despite knowing that Grace hadn't completely let go of her bitterness, I was content. I had risen above her schemes, and I felt stronger for it. Yet deep down, I knew a confrontation with her was inevitable, especially given the unresolved tension that lingered in the background. When I found out that both Grace and Larry were attending a significant company event I'd be at, I braced myself. The party was a grand affair with prominent figures from various industries in attendance. Matthew and I made sure to look our best, fully aware of our own growing influence. As we arrived, we spotted Larry and Grace waving us over. We approached them, exchanging pleasantries, though Grace's eyes raked over me with a critical smirk. "Look at you, trying to fit in," she sneered. Ignoring her, Larry chimed in warmly, "Kelly, you look lovely as always." "Thanks, Larry. How have you been?" I asked, steering the conversation away from Grace's pettiness. "Yeah, how's unemployment treating you?" Grace cut in sharply. "Wait, you're unemployed?" Larry asked, genuinely surprised. "Oh, yes, she messed up at her job, and they let her go. I've always said she's not good enough for our son. Look at her, she can't even keep a job." Grace mocked, her grin malicious. "That's enough, Mom," Matthew intervened, his tone firm. "Stop siding with her. It's bad enough having to see her everywhere. We wouldn't have to if you just left her, like I said," Grace insisted stubbornly. "All right, that's enough. Either you stop talking or I'm leaving," Matthew warned, his patience wearing thin. Larry, trying to ease the tension, smiled at me. "Kelly, sweetie, if you need a job, let me know. It would be great to work with you." "That's kind of you, Larry, but I'll have to pass," I replied graciously, though I appreciated his offer. Grace muttered under her breath, "Of course not. I told you she's lazy and incompetent." Just then, my name echoed through the room, followed by a wave of cheers. I turned to see the CEO motioning for me to come up to the small stage. Excusing myself, I left Grace and Larry behind, with Larry amused and Grace for once speechless. As I stepped onto the stage, the CEO began praising my contributions to the company, particularly my innovative ideas for the magazine. The room filled with applause, and I was soon invited to give a speech. Standing there, I thanked Matthew for his unwavering support and acknowledged the efforts of my colleagues, whose collaboration had been invaluable. I also subtly alluded to an unnamed critic whose skepticism had fueled my determination to excel. When I stepped off the stage, I was met with congratulations from various guests, many of whom were curious about the mysterious critic. I smiled, but kept that detail to myself. Returning to our table, Matthew greeted me with a proud embrace, and Larry offered his congratulations with a warm hug. Grace, however, could only manage a cold, disdainful glare. "Oh, Kelly, this is incredible. Now I see why you wouldn't want to work with us," Larry remarked, genuine admiration in his voice. "Thanks, Larry. Honestly, if you'd offered me a job 8 months ago, I might have taken it," I admitted, reflecting on how far I had come. "You should have. At least then you'd be paid more," Grace interjected sharply, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Paid more? I couldn't put a price on this," Larry countered, defending the intangible rewards of my current position. "Right, like she's worth that kind of money," Grace scoffed dismissively. "No, Grace, I mean I couldn't match what she's making right now," Larry clarified, hinting at my substantial earnings. Grace's face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean?" Larry turned to me, asking for permission. "Do you want me to tell her, Kelly? It might sound like boasting if I do." With a nod, I allowed him to reveal the truth. "Kelly makes at least 6 times more than I do in her current role," Larry said, his words leaving Grace visibly stunned. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "She must be making way more than Matthew, or I could have imagined," Grace muttered, her tone shifting from disbelief to reluctant acknowledgement. "That can't be right. You must be mistaken," she insisted, still struggling to grasp the reality. "He's not mistaken, Mom," Matthew interjected calmly. "And I meant it when I thanked you. Your constant criticism only pushed me to support Kelly even more. Seeing her success probably stings, doesn't it?" Grace's eyes narrowed, her anger barely concealed. I smiled politely. "Anyway, Matthew and I have other people to speak with. Grace, Larry, feel free to join us later," I said, making it clear we were moving on. Larry chuckled, raising his glass in a small toast to me as Matthew and I walked away. I felt more alive than ever, validated, triumphant, and grateful for Matthew's unwavering support through it all.